Rachel believed her husband when he told her he was going to spend the night in the temple in prayer and preparation. The people in the temple officials believed him when he said he would be at home in prayer and preparation. Mahlir was strong in his youthful body and could run the distance between Jerusalem and Arimathea in less than a half an hour's time. It was how the poisoned affair had come to be conducted, with Mahlir running as a disguised messenger to meet his illicit consort during the times Joseph was meeting in Jerusalem with the Sanhedrin, during the times Rachel had decided to stay at home to be with her husband. He would say that he was going out for an early morning walk or that he had early temple duties. Only a loin covering girded his body during the run, the attire of a messenger. On this day, Jael knew immediately something was wrong, that it would be their last day together. She knew it before the words were ever spoken. He sat beside her instead of embracing her. His eyes had no passion in them. Fear instead swirled within the structure of his thoughts, fear that he would not get back in time, fear of being attacked on the way, fear that he should have listened to Eli and never have come at all. And Jael saw it all. He reached and took her hand as if to be compassionate. "What is it?" she asked, even though she knew. There was no effort in what he was about to do in ending the affair, no self-sacrifice, because on this day there was only revulsion within him. The mind of man and its emotions are like the winds of the earth. They blow on the surface, and they change direction in the blink of an eye. Sometimes there is passion in them, sometimes there is not. Truth, love, the eternal, is beneath, and it is a world apart from what most people call love. This day the winds had changed to wag a huge finger of shame at Mahlir of Matthias. Other days, the winds had done just the opposite. They had held him blameless and had whispered words of comfort and had convinced him that he had done no wrong, that all he had done was to fall in love with another woman. It happens all the time, whispered the winds, even to good people. It had happened to King David. After all, were it not for King David having fallen in love with Bathsheba, King Solomon would have never been born, and the world would never have known his wisdom. All was a part of the plan. All was in good order. But beware, declare the mysteries, it is the scoffer that is in the wind. And somewhere beyond or beneath or above or within lies truth, love, a thing immutable, a fire that burns without consuming, yet consumes all. The bush on Sinai that transformed Moses, the bush that speaks if one has ears to hear. When he didn't answer her question, she reached for him. The strong lines of her face and the fullness of her lips would stir passion in any man, but not within Mahlir, not that day. That day, beauty had been transformed into ugliness. As her hands came to caress his cheeks and his neck, he shook his head in loathing. He grabbed her hands and pushed them back. He knew that tomorrow the winds might change so that he would again be filled with desire for his lover, but no matter, because tomorrow he would be safe. Tomorrow he would be away with Rachel, safe on board the cargo vessel Destiny en route to Rome. Circumstance had provided him with an escape. I cannot be with you anymore, he said in the soundlessness of a guttural whisper. She looked at him with as much surprise as if he had struck her with his fist, even though she knew. "Tomorrow I must leave," he said. "We cannot see each other again." "Why?" she finally said, forcing the word out in a barely-to-be-heard murmur. "Archelaus has targeted Eli as the one who has seditions against him. Eli has fears for the safety of his family and is sending us away." "Who are you to be made a little boy by your father-in-law?" spoke Jael. "Are you a grown man or not? Are you not a man who can make his own decisions?" "I choose to go as well," Mahlir said, "for the safety and protection of my family." At hearing the phrase, "my family," Jael's face flushed red. She swallowed his hurtful words with a breath that barely showed and said, affection present again in her profound Jewish eyes, "Then let us share our final moments together with beauty." But Mahlir could not. He could not have done it even if he had wanted to, not even to be compassionate, because there was no beauty in it. There was only the fear, the ugliness, the shame, and an image of Rachel. A powerful, silent need for his wife flared up inside him. Jael knew it, could see it. Though no words revealed it, she ripped away from his hands and struck him with a closed fist, knocking his phylactery askew and ripping a gash in his forehead with a ring of gemstones Joseph had given her only a few days earlier. He had given it to her for no reason, only because he loved her. She pointed with the forefinger of the same hand, stained in blood from his forehead, and screamed for him to get out. But he didn't want it to end this way. He wanted her to see it like he saw it. He told of the dream, and he told her of the mysteries, of how the mysteries revealed the structure of marriage, and how the structure of marriage in the eyes of the mysteries were something to be revered, of the bonding between a man and a woman, that it was a bonding welded together by forces of realms divine, and that it cannot be broken without serious consequences. If Mahlir could have only known how very serious those consequences would be, he never would have walked into the storm. Never. She finally did see it, or said she did, because the anger in her face subsided and the affection came back. "All right," she said, speaking so softly now he could barely hear any of it. But he knew that she had said it from the movement of her lips. She reached for him again, and was powerful, supreme confidence reigned, surrounded her, permeated her. "But right now I need to touch you," she said, still speaking soundlessly. "One more time." He allowed it. She reached to undress him. He allowed it. She disrobed and presented her naked body to him. He allowed it. She pulled off his waist clothing. He didn't resist. And she pressed her body to his and reached to his loins to unify herself with him one final time. He allowed it. He was late. His arrival at the temple in the morning did not come until the breaking of dawn. It should have been hours earlier. Rachel was among those gathering in the court of women, he was sure, as he hurried through the streets already beginning to fill with Passover visitors. The week-long festivities were nearly at an end. Still, people remained, enough to clog the roadways. Rachel was proud of his accomplishments, keeping records of them, all written down on expensive papyrus and tied in a cedar box. She would be there, surely, hoping to catch a glimpse of him from the balconies where the women are allowed in this most important time in his life. He had forgotten she would be preparing, of course, packing and loading the animals. Sweat was burning his brow, a foul potion coming from within, burning, itching, chafing it red where the strap of his phylactery lay, where beneath was the gash given him by Jael, drawing a line in his forehead, not bleeding now, but festering, a reminder forever of his deeds, because in the black box inside his phylactery, properly on his forehead, as it should be, carrying in it the writings of the prophets, was an excerpt from Isaiah. "I will make justice the measuring line, and righteousness the plumb line. Hail will sweep away your refuge, the lie, and water will overflow your hiding place." Words of his own choosing, written in his own hand long before his fall, now cursing him, burning its white-hot message into his skin, into the skin of his forehead. He ran, stumbled around corners and through side streets, taking the shortest route to the shop on Clothes Market Street with the red awning where the old woman with no teeth sold steaming corn cakes every day. Left over to Tyropian, the street skirting the West Temple wall, down Tyropian, and under the giant archway over which the main road enters the temple from the Zijkstra and the king's palace, past the many shops and offices on the left and on the right, past the entrance to the chamber of hewn stone wherein the Sanhedrin sits in council, to the great portico archway. The portico archway is 100 steps high, as high above a man's head as the cedars of Lebanon, vivid, foreboding. In minutes, sunlight would be shaving the oxen-sized bricks of the south wall, some of which were bossed in the middle to cut defining shadows against the soon-to-arrive glittering whiteness. Mahlir was wishing it was there now. Warm sunshine always had a way of making him believe that everything was all right in God's world. The streets of Jerusalem were wide, with nothing built over them, unusual for a city in Israel. But then Jerusalem was no ordinary city. Its curbstone thoroughfares, designed to accommodate the throngs visiting the temple daily, those coming to pray, to sacrifice, to atone, to renew, were 40 and 50 spans in width, often opening to large public squares, and were constructed on foundations 15 spans in depth, 60 in the vicinity of the temple, where the larger paving stones were used, a span being the breadth of a man's hand, finger to thumb. A single paving stone was large enough for a man to lay across and still not touch the other side. It was huge. Visitors were beginning to climb to the portico. Mahlir felt their stares as he ran up the steps past them. Could they see the insanity in his face and the perspiration soiling his garments? and the itching sore on his forehead beneath his phylactery? Could they tell that God was punishing him by marking him with his sin? It had transformed itself into something worse than a cut. He had stopped to look at it in the reflection of a pool of water. It was enlarged with red bumps and blisters. Leprosy? The thought of it stilled his heart. He made sure it was covered by the phylactery strap so nobody could see. Inside the portico, all of it restored since the fire, the most magnificent enclosure in all of Palestine, merchants and money changers were beginning to set up their booths. Among pillars so thick the arms of 3 people were necessary to enwrap just one. Pillars so tall they would have spired to the stars had a roof not covered them. Those visiting from far-off lands would exchange coins for ones bearing the inscription Yehud, or for the Roman denarius, or the drachma of Tyre, any of which would be used to purchase clothing, food, and wares, or to pay the temple tax, or the tax to Archelaus, or the tax to Rome. Such was the temple, the heart of Jerusalem, the center of commerce, the center of social life for the elite and penniless alike, and the center of all things sacred. And Jerusalem was the hub of the world, the gateway through which travelers from all 4 corners of civilization passed, bringing with them their money for exchange and their goods and their gods and goddesses and their religions and their cultures. It had been that way for generations. Perhaps that was why in Palestine there existed such a blending of cultures and so many different beliefs. Over the span of the years, bits of those cultures and beliefs had mingled with and even helped to form the belief of the Jews. That perhaps is an explanation of why within the walls of the temple, within the ranks of the priesthood, there were people with so many different variations of that belief. Those who believed in life after death, those who did not. Those who believed in the eventual raising up of the gathered souls of the righteous, those who did not. Those who believed in the regeneration of the soul through successive births and rebirths, those who did not. Those who believed in following the laws of the Torah to the letter, those who did not. Those who were committed to the violent overthrow of Roman oppression by an army led by the coming Messiah, those who were not. With money exchanged for acceptable currency, the travelers would then purchase wares and food from the merchants. If they were of the belief of the Jews, followers of Yahweh, they would buy from one of the vendors an animal pure and unblemished for sacrifice. Those selling animals were the most abundant of all of the temple merchants. And as Mahlir passed, they were setting out their cages, doves and pigeons for women, unclean from their menstrual cycles and from childbirth, so that they may be cleansed with the blood of something innocent, lambs for the atonement of sins, heifer if the buyer had the money, to be slaughtered with kidneys cut out and washed and burned, an aroma pleasing to the Lord, their blood sprinkled on the altar, so that Yahweh would forgive. The cages were large and bulky and lay over much of the floor. The portico, lit now by lamps, would soon be illumined by sunshine. The sunshine would momentarily be breaking through the archways of 100 or more ceiling-high windows, its beams crossing from heights to bounce off gold-gilded sides of the glittering green walls. He hurried across the floor. It was a breadth of mosaic second only in size to the hippodrome. A mouse was also scurrying across its expanse. An expensively dressed woman tried to catch it beneath her jeweled sandal for no more than the amusement of it, but missed. The poor creature, it'd be half the morning completing the perilous journey. After elbowing and excusing his way through, Mahlir walked out into the open of the esplanade. The bluish light of early morning was beginning to paint away the stars. The people were beginning to stir, those asleep that had nowhere else to go the night before, Gentiles. That part of the temple, in itself the size of a small village, was a gathering place for non-Jews, a haven for travelers from afar, a place of safety, watched over by priests in the corner towers, or simply a place for relaxation, oftentimes a meeting place, a place to buy and sell, a place open to all. Mahlir walked toward the balustrade, the barrier between the court of Gentiles and the upper-level terraces. Its low pillars seemed to speak to him, to tell him he was also unworthy to enter. Between each pillar were sections of waist-high walls carved alternatively with the unfolding flower of knowledge and the Greek inscription forbidding non-Jews to pass. No outsider shall enter the protective enclosure, the inscription said, around the sanctuary, and whoever is caught will only have himself to blame for the ensuing death. A nightingale settled itself upon the section in front of him above the inscription. It was properly surprised at its solidity and had to dance to assure itself that it was firm. The stones of the temple were so white they looked soft and often sparkled like they were formed from bits of gemstones. To touch them was an urge irresistible. From this level, high above the street, the world was still, the soon-to-open marketplace being nothing more than the distant murmurings of another world. The only distinguishable sound was the hushing of the aqueduct, shaming him for his betrayal of a woman whose only fault was believing him when he said he would love her and honor her and protect her. It carried water as pure as Rachel, as pure as that which fell from the sky, entering the temple one level below, flowing all the way from Solomon's pools in Bethlehem. Off to the east, above the marbled awnings of Solomon's porch, one could see the rise of the Mount of Olives. Sleepy sheets of fog were entwining the trees massive and old, some old enough to have been seen by the eyes of King David. Twisted and unsightly they were, but also strong and compassionate, ready to offer comfort, standing like gentle sentries above the fog, a mist whitening by the second under the emerging dawn. Oh, would that he could take wing like the nightingale in front of him, with no cares, no sin, and catch the free wind and fly to the solace of those trees and disappear in the embrace of their branches. Just then a stream of lavender sunshine broke over the eastern ridge and burned a pathway through the fog. It startled him. In the same instant, a sound came from somewhere. He spun around and saw a priest pushing a cart of tools toward him. The noise made by the wooden wheels was deafening. Mahlir wanted to silence him. The priest looked up. Mahlir saw then that he was barely more than a child, 12, 13 at the most. A man by law, but a child nonetheless. Mahlir put a hand on the cart and stopped him. "Where do you go? Who are you? What are you doing here? Why do you wear the white robes of the temple?" Mahlir was spewing the words in a guttural whisper. He was angry, though all he wanted was for the boy to stop the wretched clattering. A scent came to his nostrils, intermingled with the drifting fragrance of the mineral-laden Dead Sea air, an unfamiliar scent, yet familiar in a way, a fresh smell, the way an emptying alabaster jar smells, the kind used in the anointing of those in the service of the Lord. The smell was not of the perfume itself, but of the vessels of the porous stone from which they are carved. The alabaster, which after a time gives off its own fragrance, unique unto itself, having drawn in the oil, having mixed it with its own essence. Of a subtler nature than the oil is this smell, the smell of alabaster, like the clean powdery smell of a craftsman's shop. Such was the scent that dangled in the air that morning, but with a hint of jasmine, maybe also of rose, and of the wild wind, and of the breeze that floats through the pillared curtains of a late evening banquet, with the flowers of the hillside still upon it. Strong, yet gentle, replied the boy, politely, innocently, in Hebrew, with a maturity of speech beyond his years. "Sir, my apologies. I am doing the bidding of His Holiness. It is my duty this morning to prepare the gardens in the Court of Women. I go there now, as are my instructions." "Why are you here? Why have I not seen you before today?" Mahlir again was whispering because he didn't want to be heard by anybody else. A most strange thing," did the boy then say. "I am in my father's house," he said. He said it quite matter-of-factly. The boy was trifling with him, was Mahler's first thought, until he realized the magnitude of what he had just said. The boy was of the Herodian line, perhaps Archelaus' son, some close relation to the great Herod, builder of the temple. "Go then," Mahlir said, and smiled, forgetting for the moment the depths of his depression. "Be about those duties of yours. Know you, though, that you are lost within your father's house." Mahlir gestured forward beyond the balustrade to the walls surrounding the courts and the temple proper, all built on the surface of the esplanade. A fortress on top of a fortress. The Court of Women is opposite the direction you are going. It is there, in the very area where you procured the tools. I am on my way there also. Please don't follow me closely, though. I'm late for my duties, and I wish not to attract attention, so go. The boy seemed to want to speak to him, but Mahlir was too obsessed with his purpose to pay him any mind, and hurried away, up the 7 steps and through the balustrade and across the chosen level to the Court of Women, all the while hearing the wheels of the cart behind him. Mahlir walked quickly through the Court of Women gateway. He passed 2 priests, Nehemiah and Shelomoth. They took no notice of him. They were engaged in discussions of their own, intent only on each other. "Nay, you are wrong, a symbol only," one was saying to the other. It is not a flesh and blood creature. Properly translated by Yahweh himself, 666 means mankind, that which is human. Calm and stoic in their long blue and black robes and their sashes of silver, and their belt-length gray beards, powerfully godly. Never would they have allowed themselves to become entangled in sin as Mahlir had done. Never. Once through the gateway, once inside the court of women, one beholds the true beauty of the temple at sunrise. Above the pillared archway is the court of Israel. And spiring higher still is the temple proper, gold latticework encircling its roof line, flashing brilliant in the sun. Priests were gathering to sing on the 14 circular steps. People were beginning to file into the courtyard, elders and those of high position in front, women with the children viewing and pointing down from the balconies and the porches above. Mahlir looked for Rachel, forgetting for a moment that she was not there. She'd be home packing, of course. She would be preparing for their journey into their new life. The sounding of the ram's horn was splitting the morning silence, a signal that the priest was ready, beyond sight, inside the holy place, hidden from all eyes, prepared to give the absolution and offer up the sacrifice. But the priest was not there. The priest was late because he had been in sin with the wife of a man of God. The clattering of the cart behind him was maddening. Mahlir turned. "Stop, return home," the boy said. Or did he? Because his lips didn't move. Mahler's imagination. "Return home immediately," the boy said. Or did he? Mahlir was almost amused. Presumptuous little devil, the most bothersome people alive can be the sons of kings and monarchs, old enough to wield power, too young to be mellowed by the flavor of life's experiences. Who does he think he is, ordering me, a priest of Yahweh, to abandon my duties? Go home. There is still time, he thought he heard the boy say again, louder this time. Yet, too soft to be really sure, Mahlir answered it as if the boy had said it. "I don't have time to explain all this to you about the importance of atonement. The blood of the Lamb is not for me. It is for the people I serve. It is something I have an obligation to provide. It is for their redemption." He pointed to the crowd that was beginning to gather on the esplanade, waiting to have their sins washed away for the day. "All these people that you see, I would be cheating them, all these people, if I abandoned my duties. I would be cheating them of their absolution if I went home." Funny thing, Mahlir almost did do it. He almost did go home because of something hollow inside that was growing, something that was bursting out with a need to caress and hold his wife, that left him with an ache to feel her against him, not to have her sexually. Well, yes, no more than that. It was more like he wanted to melt into her so that they could be like two clouds floating, merging, like sometimes seen on sunlit, carefree days. When he got home, he would do it. Yes, by Jupiter, he would. He would take her in his arms, and they would be clouds. But for now, the people needed their absolution. To abandon the people now in favor of his wife would be misplaced responsibility. What the people would soon see, if Mahlir could get there in time, would be the rising of the incense through the roof, drifting into the day's first light, placed upon the inner altar by the priest chosen that day by Mahlir, the son of the great Matthias, if he could get there in time. Then the people, the men below in the court of Israel and the women above on the balconies, would see the doors of the temple proper swing open. Those closest might be fortunate enough to see beyond the curtain, wherein the priest, Mahlir, the one chosen by God that day, would read from the scrolls. From behind the curtain in tones loud enough for everybody to hear, he would utter words from the prophets, chosen by prayer to reach the hearts of those present. Then the curtain would part for a moment. Perhaps someone might even glimpse the forbidden inner chamber, and the priest would emerge and walk out into the courtyard where the 49 steps of the main altar ascend to the heights of the Lord's holy fire, burning always. There, he would offer up an animal to God, splitting it open, spilling its blood, burning its entrails, an aroma pleasing to the Lord, so that the Lord in his benevolence might forgive. Soon, Mahlir arrived. While the echoes of the second shofar were ringing through the valleys, he was putting on the vestments. Soon he would burn the incense and offer the reading and the sacrifice and the prayers to absolve the people of their sins, while he fairly dripped in his. The soldiers were taking Rachel to the tower. As he was putting on the vestments, of course he had no way of knowing, the tower was an attachment to the temple, a stone's throw from where he stood. taking her there to be stripped naked and tied to a wheel 4 times the size of an ox cart wheel, as he was putting on the ephod and the breastplate and the robes and the turban. The ephod was of a cloth of finely twisted linen, gold and purple and blue and scarlet. He draped it over his shoulders, front and back, and fastened it with its gold clasp. The weight of the onyx stones gave him power, filled his limbs with strength. Braided chains of pure gold hung rope-like from each stone, clinging to him, calming him. She was crying out for Mahlir as he was attaching the breastplate, crafted of the same material as the ephod, gold and blue, purple and scarlet, and embroidered with inset gemstones representative of the 12 tribes of Israel. Upon the breastplate lay more loops of gold, calming him, energizing him. She was being lashed to the wheel, calling his name, pleading for his help, as he enclosed himself in the blue robe, hemmed with pomegranates of purple and scarlet yarn, with gold bells that tinkled at the slightest movement, vestments kept locked in the tower but given for use at Passover. As Rachel's screams echoed from somewhere, Mahlir did not recognize them. He thought it was someone else who needed help. He thought she was home preparing for their new life. He slowly placed the tall turban on his head, with its engraved plate of gold. Holy to the Lord, it read, high in view of all, so that the wearer might bear the guilt of those for whom he prays. He stepped into the holy inner place, as only the most holy and pure of men are able to do, into its solitude, and looked around at the walls, a sight few have seen or ever will see. High walls reaching many times the height of a man, sculpted in intricate tracings of gold palm trees. The floor was wrought in mosaics of God's creations, birds, trees, and all manner of creatures. It was seamless and smooth, like the reflected beauty of a green countryside on still waters. Above loomed winged seraphs, enormous, hammered flawlessly out of solid gold, gazing down at the place where the ark and the crown will rest when found, and gazing down at the insignificant human creature called Mahlir of Matthias. He removed his sandals, realizing he was on holy ground, and walked to the altar and scooped up incense and put it on the fire. The flame flashed, and the smoke rose up, and through the opening, the pungent smell nearly made him cough. Then came chants from the priests on the steps outside as they saw it, and there came the sounding of the ram's horn. Mahlir repeated the process and waited again for the chants and the ram's horn. A third time he did it. Now it was time for the reading of the Torah, loud enough to be heard beyond the curtains and through the open doors into the courtyard. There was no time to pray and search for a passage, something he should have done and marked the time the night before. But of course he had been elsewhere. He simply untied the scroll and rolled it open to his eyes and let his eyes fall where they may to let chance choose for him, and trembled at the words. He thought he had picked up the Torah, but in his haste his hands had fallen upon the scroll of the prophet Isaiah. He didn't realize his mistake until it was too late, until words were already being spoken. I will make justice the measuring line and righteousness the plumb line. Hail will sweep away your refuge, the lie, and water will overflow your hiding place. The words of his phylactery, cursing him, rotting his skin, marking him as a leper. He reached out, half in anger, half in terror, and rolled the papyrus forward to a new passage, one that would not curse him, and read again where his eyes fell. I will go before you and will level the mountains. I will break down gates of bronze and cut through bars of iron. I will give you treasures of darkness, riches stored in secret places, so that you may know that I am the Lord, the God of Israel, who summons you by name. It was what he wanted, a passage of blessing and hope, a prophetic promise of splendor and beauty. Still he was terrified, still he was angry. He threw the scroll against the holy walls. Its inner spine, cracked and lay crooked. The ram's horn sounded again, and the midpoint of the curtains parted, all 10 curtains of tightly woven fabric, of gold and blue and purple and scarlet, 2 sets of 5 hooked together with golden clasps and heavy loops of blue. They were pulled away by a cord so small it could not be seen. What the priests and the assembled holy men of Israel saw from the other side was a glimpse of the most holy place and the Zadokite who was representing them before God. A tremor ran through him, and he forgot for a moment his burdens. He put his sandals back on and stepped forward through the opening. The curtains closed in back of him, floated together as if by a will of their own. The assemblage chanted, "Holy to the Lord." And hearing it, the people outside in the court of Israel repeated, "Holy to the Lord." The priests on the steps of the court of women repeated, "Holy to the Lord." It was repeated in Hebrew, of course, and the harmonious chants of the women on the balconies echoed, "Holy to the Lord." But of course, Rachel was not among them. All who saw Mahlir bowed as he walked past and intoned, "Holy to the Lord." Mahlir wondered in his ecstasy what it would be like to be the coming anointed one, the Messiah, and to have the entire world bow before him, except that the gold of his turban and the braids of his ropes would be brighter if he were the Messiah, by 10 times, 100 times, and the colors of his robes would be richer tenfold, 100 times, and the stones of his breastplate would catch the sun 100 times over. And it would be he who would be wearing the crown of King David with its full measure of gold and its precious stones, not some blowhard shepherd who looks more like a gorilla than a Messiah. Such a sight he would be if he were the Messiah. And he wondered, will he ever meet him? If in fact the Messiah does come, will he be one of the ones to serve him, the true Messiah? The true Messiah would be one who would not steal from his own, as Athronges had done, or rape his own. The true Messiah would be one who would focus his might against only the Romans and the Gentiles, not against his chosen people.